How's it, everybody? Welcome back to the Rocky Fern. My name is Luca and I have OI type 4. In today's episode of Show Me the Green, I'm showing you all of my Hoya Polynuras, the Fishtail Hoya. Let's get into it. So here we are, guys. I have 3 different types of Hoya Polyneura to show you. They're called the Fishtail Hoya because the way that their 2 new emerging leaves come out, they look just like a mermaid's tail or a fish tail, which is kind of unique. A lot of Hoyas, they have a growth point, and that growth point will kind of vine out, and the leaves, they start out small further down that new growth point, and as that growth point continues to extend, then the leaves start to enlarge and get bigger, but there's always a bit of a tail. Whereas with the Polynura, it seems like the 2 leaves come out first, and then that growth point comes out a little bit later on. They come from a huge swath of Indochina and the Himalayas, parts of India, and like most Hoyas, they are a type of epiphyte rather, and in this kind of subshrub of the canopy. And I have in front of us here today 3 different variations on the color. So I have the normal, as it were, the wild form of Hoya Polyneura. And I got this guy from an Etsy plant shop called A Plant Shop. I'll make sure to post it here. And I'll also do a close-up of the leaves. So while I have that picture of the wild form of the Polynura, we can talk about the name. So poly meaning many, neura meaning veins, and you can see why it's called that. The veination on these leaves, there's just a lot of detail to the veination, so you can see that. And what's really cool is each of the leaves on a Polynura, there's like a little spur right at the base of each leaf where it meets the petiole, and then that petiole will join and meet the stem. So very cool. And I noticed that some Hoyas do have that and some don't, but it's very prominent on the Polynura. Okay, so now we have the Hoya Broget, or Broget as I like to call it. And it's a splash form of the Polynura. And I got this plant from an Etsy shop called Cactus and Exotics, and I believe they're out of Florida. And they Polynura as a whole grows very, very fast. Once you get this plant happy, it just starts shooting out length and new growth points all the time. So this plant is kept outdoors on my Hoya wall. It is exposed to pretty intense morning sun, but it hasn't burned. And I noticed that as the leaves start to harden off more, they start to darken in color. And as I continue to play around with the microclimates in the yard, I'm taking notes and trying to further experiment and learn what can go where in the yard. Another cool part about this plant is it has these black, I believe they're extrafloral nectaries, or EFNs, as they're sometimes referred to, but they don't really exude anything, but they are black, and so that is interesting. There's a lot of actual black spotting going on with the Polynura as a whole. The Broget, I'll put another close-up right here. You can see the veination on this leaf structure and also the splashing. I do think that if I were to put this in lower light, the splash would actually enhance, because I'm getting very little, if at all, on some of these leaves. Although this set of leaves right here has a ton of splashing, so, and it's that paler color. So I don't know. Unlike the Hoya, the AH074 silver, that seems to show more silver in lower light, this plant may not be affected by that. And another cool note on the silvering or the splashing of Hoyas in a lot of plants is you get the splash when the subcutaneous layers of dermis, the skin layers of the leaf, there's a little air-filled pocket between those layers, and for whatever reason those appear silver. Why they do it, we don't know. It's pretty, it happens in quite a few Hoyas, but we just don't know why they do it. And then I have kind of the creme de la creme. This is the Hoya Polyneura Albomarginata, and I got this from a California Etsy shop called Limu Plants. And when I got it, it was, I believe, a 3-leaf cutting, had root stubs on it, and it was sent to me in a little vial. I mean, it was a very fresh cutting. She might have cut it the day she sent it to me. And all I did is I put it straight into a glass tumbler with pond, and I had about an inch of water at the bottom, and within a couple of weeks that thing had shot roots not only to the bottom of the tumbler, all across throughout the pond, but had started setting out new growth points as well. And here we are now. And like the other Polynura, they grow out and down and have this kind of sweeping, cascading, heavy, lush look to them. I mean, I think it's a really needed Hoya in any collection. If you don't have a Hoya Polyneura, I'm not sure why you don't yet. Definitely get it. Because that tumbler did become too small of a vessel for the Hoya, for this Albomarginata, I did transfer it to this tumbler just recently, and so it's still showing the signs of stress from being moved. What's interesting is I actually put the entire root ball, pond and everything included, just straight into a bigger vessel, so there's very little disturbance to the roots, and it's still showing signs of stress. So that's kind of interesting to note, that maybe Hoya Polyneura does have sensitive roots and does not like change. It went to the exact same pond mix, just into a larger vessel. However, this one now has a drainage hole that still has a 1-inch reservoir, but now has a drainage hole that I can kind of water, let it overflow, and I don't have to worry about am I drowning the plant or whatnot. But it loved the tumbler. It had no issues with the tumbler. Kind of notes on keeping it: the Broget and the Albomarginata are kept in a pond mix, whereas the normal Polynura is kept in a aeroid mix that I've added extra moss to, some sphagnum moss, and it's kept in a terracotta pot. This plant, along with a couple other Hoyas that I have, like the Linearis, they dry out and have to be watered probably every 4 days, especially now because it's getting up to 94 degrees here in the house as we approach summer. And they dry out very quickly, and both the Linearis and this Polynura will let you know that they're thirsty because they droop a little bit. And then I just run water through the top tilt drains out, and that will last me, like I said, about 3 or 4 days, and they've been doing very well. One note on Hoya when it comes to terracotta is they will attach their roots to the inside of the terracotta. So I'm a little concerned about what I'm going to do when this guy needs an up pot, and whether or not I'll up pot him into terracotta. I kind of wish I never planted this guy in terracotta, but it is what it is. I do notice that even this guy has some splashing, not as much as the Broget, but it does have some splashing to it, and so that's pretty interesting to know. But I want you guys to really pay attention to that, the kind of the growth structure. They kind of reach out. This guy's reaching up until he gets too heavy, and then he'll drop, and they continue to kind of do that little curve to him, and they just kind of cascade out like this. So eventually this guy will drop down and whatnot. I tend to not cut my plants, mainly Hoyas, and replant them in here to make a fuller pot up top. I feel like that actually sets the plant back. That's my personal experience and my personal opinion. But what I like to do is actually have these guys just send out a really long runner if they need to, and eventually they're going to start concentrating on growth coming out from the top. The Linearis is the same way. The Linearis is maybe 3 feet long now. You can kind of see it behind me right here. And that is never been cut, and it came to me as a little 5-inch cutting, and it just shot out really long, and then shot out second growth point, and that also caught up and is very long. And now there's a third growth point coming out the top, and I think that is a better approach for me anyway than cutting and trying to propagate in the top to make a fuller top. I did the same thing with the variegated string of hearts and also the string of pearls, and they're very full and in my opinion very robust root systems. So that's just something to consider if you do, if you guys are on the fence of whether or not you should cut and propagate to make a fuller top, or just let it kind of do its own thing. I'm kind of on the fence of letting it do its own thing. Anyway, Hoya Polyneura does come in a lot of color forms. There's also an inner variegated form. There's a super splash form. Yeah, so Polynura I think is very exciting as far as the colors that you can get out of this particular Hoya. They do like more water than most Hoyas, in my experience. So, and it is a thinner leafed Hoya, but not as thin as like a Multiflora or the a Campanulata, for sure. They definitely have thinner leaves than the Hoya Polyneura. It's still kind of a stiff leaf, but it's, you know, nowhere near as stiff as a Latifolia or Undulata or anything like that. Propagation, I think this is an excellent plant to practice propagation on. Like I said, I got this as just a 3-leaf cutting, perhaps, maybe even a 1-leaf cutting. I just can't remember on this plant whether it was a 1-leaf or 3-leaf. But it was super easy. I would just get some stem, root it in water. They root beautifully. You could root it in moss if you wanted to. You could root it in pond, which is my preferred way to go. Perlite would work really well. And they root excellent. And I believe that the Albomarginata, being a Polynura and as easy as they are to grow, the prices will start to come down. That cutting was triple digits when I bought it for a 3-leaf cutting, so but that was the going rate, and actually it's kind of still the going rate right now as of mid 2023. Would I pay that again? I don't think so. Especially knowing now how easy it is to propagate Polynura. Pests, I haven't had too many issues with pests. This is one of the Hoyas that does seem to attract mealybugs the most. I believe it was this guy that actually had infestations twice out of all my Polynuras. The Albomarginata never has had an infestation. Now, of course, I do keep it with the systemic, but now I do systemics on all of them. Except this guy. Being kept outdoors, I haven't had to use a systemic, and if I do get an issue, maybe with whitefly or whatever, it seems to have an ecology out there that takes care of the infestation. So kind of lucky that way. Again, I may try to put up some shade cloth over the Hoya wall. I'm not sure yet, because it seems like majority of them are kind of lighter in color than you know, the ones kept indoors. You'll notice that this leaf right here is a little bit yellow, and that's because it's actually reaching up toward a growth light. But the Broget was all pretty uniformly dark green when it was being kept inside, and not this kind of lime green pale color that you see here. Also, one thing to note with the Polynura is they send out a ton of peduncles, and they also abort most of those peduncles. None of the peduncles that these guys have produced have actually made it to fruition yet. There are still quite a few peduncles on here, but like I said, a lot of the peduncles that Polynura produces, they abort. And I believe they want to flower readily, and I think they need a certain size before they feel comfortable actually not aborting those peduncles. And when they do, I'll create a short for you, because I heard the flowers on these are amazing, and I also heard the smell is very, very good too. So stay tuned for that. I'll obviously have a lot of updates on all the Hoyas, but a lot of the Polynuras for sure. I think I am done collecting on Polynura. I may end up getting the inner variegated one day, maybe, we'll see. While I love this genus and I love this particular species, I hate to have multiples of the same plant, and to me, really, they are all kind of the same plant. I may even all put them in the same pot at one point. I think that would be kind of a cool texture and look to it, as I had this very huge, cascading, bushy Polynura pot. I think that would be very cool. But that's kind of down the line. Yeah, so stay tuned. I'll have a lot more updates coming. We're getting very close to doing the full house tour. We're almost to 200 subscribers, which to me is still mind-blowing that we're even close to 200. And you know, the moon's the limit, so I really want to kind of shoot for more than that and kind of grow the channel and whatnot. So if you guys have any suggestions on what you would like to see here on this channel, for sure, send a comment, and I reply to every comment. Until then, make sure to give a thumbs up if you like what you see, subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next adventure.